The Ford Granada is one of those cars that quietly changed the course of automotive history, even if it rarely gets the credit it deserves today. When Ford introduced the Granada in 1972, it wasn't just launching another family sedan, it was making a bold statement. The company wanted to challenge established executive cars from Rover, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz and prove that Ford could compete in a market segment where prestige mattered just as much as engineering. Ironically, the Granada name created confusion from the very beginning. In North America, many people associate the Granada with the smaller American model introduced in 1975. But in Europe, the Granada was something entirely different. It was larger, more sophisticated, and far more ambitious. More importantly, it represented Ford's attempt to transform its image from a manufacturer of practical family cars into a brand capable of attracting executive buyers. To understand why the Granada was so important, you have to look at Ford Europe's position in the late 1960s. At the time, Ford's flagship British models, the Zephyr, Zodiac, and Executive, were struggling to compete against rivals such as Rover and Triumph. Across continental Europe, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Opel were becoming increasingly dominant. Ford knew it needed a fresh start. The company had already modernized much of its lineup with successful models like the Escort, Cortina MK3, and Capri. These cars brought bold styling and a distinctly American influence to European roads. However, Ford still lacked a truly competitive executive car. The answer would become the Granada. Ford invested more than $50 million into developing the project, an enormous sum in the early 1970s. Over 500 engineers, designers, and specialists worked on the car. It was tested across Europe, in the Arctic Circle, and even in the harsh conditions of Africa. Ford wanted one car that could replace multiple models across Britain and Germany while establishing a stronger presence in the executive market. When the Granada finally debuted at the Geneva Motor Show in March 1972, it immediately impressed critics. The car featured independent rear suspension, a range of engines from economical 4-cylinders to powerful V6 units, and body styles that included a saloon, coupe, and estate. For the first time, Ford also built its estate version in-house. The automotive press praised the Granada's ride quality and refinement. Some journalists even compared its comfort to the legendary Citroën DS. Buyers loved its combination of attractive styling, impressive equipment, and competitive pricing. It offered much of the sophistication of a BMW or Mercedes-Benz without the premium price tag. Success came quickly. Fleet operators adopted the Granada in large numbers, while British police forces embraced the powerful V6 models as motorway patrol vehicles. Taxi companies appreciated its durability and spacious interior. Soon, the Granada became a familiar sight across Europe. The car also developed a strong presence in popular culture. British television series such as The Sweeney and The Professionals regularly featured Granadas, giving the car a tough and purposeful image. In South Africa, Ford even approved a special version fitted with a Mustang-sourced 5.0-liter V8 engine, creating one of the most unusual performance sedans of its era. Yet despite all its success, Ford discovered an important truth about the executive car market. Building a great car was only half the battle. Buyers in this segment weren't simply purchasing transportation. They were buying status, image, and prestige. To strengthen the Granada's appeal, Ford turned to Ghia, the famous Italian design house it had acquired in 1970. The Ghia badge was introduced as a luxury trim level, adding an extra layer of sophistication and exclusivity. Although the differences were often subtle, the name carried considerable prestige and helped Ford market the Granada as something more than an ordinary family car. The second-generation Granada arrived in 1977 with sharper styling and updated engines, including the modern Cologne V6. The new model continued the success of the original, and together, the first two generations sold more than 1.4 million units. On paper, Ford seemed to have achieved exactly what it wanted. But the market was changing. By the early 1980s, executive car buyers were becoming increasingly focused on brand image. BMW and Mercedes-Benz had evolved into powerful status symbols. Audi was rapidly gaining ground through its technological reputation. Buyers weren't just comparing performance figures anymore, they were looking at badges. This created a problem that Ford couldn't easily solve. No matter how refined or well-equipped the Granada became, it still wore the same Ford badge found on an entry-level Fiesta. The engineering was competitive, the equipment was impressive, and the pricing was attractive. Yet many buyers simply preferred the prestige associated with German luxury brands. In 1985, Ford launched the Granada's successor, known as the Scorpio, across most of Europe. Technologically, it was one of the most advanced cars in its class. It became the first European car to feature ABS as standard equipment across the entire range. It also offered a remarkable list of features, including a heated windscreen, trip computer, variable power steering, and electrically adjustable rear seats. The automotive industry recognized its excellence by awarding it the 1986 European Car of the Year title. Yet even that wasn't enough to change public perception. Buyers continued gravitating toward BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi. Ford eventually realized something important. The challenge wasn't engineering, it was branding. That realization led to one of the most significant decisions in Ford's history. In 1989, the company purchased Jaguar for $2.5 billion. Later, it would acquire Volvo as well. Rather than trying to transform Ford into a luxury brand, the company decided it was easier to acquire brands that already possessed the heritage and prestige luxury buyers wanted. The final chapter came in 1994, when Ford introduced a heavily redesigned Scorpio and officially retired the Granada name. Unfortunately, the controversial styling proved deeply unpopular. Critics mocked its unusual headlights and awkward proportions, while buyers increasingly chose more attractive alternatives from BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz. Sales collapsed. Fewer than 100,000 examples of the final Scorpio were sold. And in June 1998, Ford ended production without a replacement. Looking back today, the Ford Granada remains one of the most significant cars Ford Europe ever produced. It arrived at exactly the right moment, offering style, comfort, value, and refinement in a package that challenged the established order. For over a decade, it proved that Ford could build an executive car capable of standing alongside respected European rivals. Yet its story also teaches a valuable lesson. In the luxury car market, engineering alone isn't enough. Prestige, heritage, and brand perception can be just as important as performance and technology. The Granada succeeded because it arrived when buyers still valued practical advantages. The Scorpio struggled because the market had shifted toward image and status. Ultimately, Ford learned that luxury isn't something you can simply engineer into a car. Sometimes it's something that takes decades to build, and sometimes it's something you have to buy.